Right.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it, before we do it with the kids, you say, oh, it will be like 1 hour and something, losing the time, painting, and we are not allowed to do that. But by the end, the kids still remember, you know, all the name of the planets, that there's some planets that are closer to the sun, which one is the far, how the planets move. I mean, there was so much involved in those lessons, and you know, that kind of art that the kids will never forget. Even it have been months from that, and they still saying Saturn. So every.
One of the things that I think has been pretty awesome is, you know, with the artists coming in, it has allowed the little people to be able to use all 5 senses in all of the projects that you know, that have been done. And then it just kind of brings you back to the thought, okay, we do have little kindergartners, and that is how they learn a lot, by using those 5 senses. So it makes you think, okay, how can I teach this lesson so that they can use those 5 senses, and then things will, you'll actually be able to reach many of the learners. Plus, it will be something like has been said, it will stick out. It, you know, it will be something more meaningful to them. You know, it might be years later, and they say, "Oh, I remember when we did such and such." So that's what has been so good. You know, that I've seen they are able to use all 5 senses.
Yeah.
So
and with the projects that we've done, I mean, you were talking about, I think it was you, about, you know, taking kids on field trips and how we're represented in the community. Well, that's what they talk about when they go home. Like, I made a solar system today. Like, you know, they're not going to say I did a worksheet in math. Like, they're going to say I saw an ice sculpture, and that's something like that, you know, the people around the community can see it. And I think, you know, when they're going home and saying that, you know, they learn a new African dance, or they worked with the artist to make an ice sculpture. You know, I mean, these are things that you don't always find in a public school out in Montbello. And I think that, you know, by them talking that, well, what school do you go to? I mean, that starts to create our reputation as well, that, like, it is a project-based learning environment.
I think one thing that Elise brought to our, you know, also to our room was, like, introducing, like, using music to talk about different things, and I noticed how well my students were really connecting with, like, they can still listen to a song and be like, that sounds like it's from Africa with all those heavy drums, and, you know, they made that connection with music. So we were reading a book about Charlie Parker and jazz, and so, like, we spent a lot of time listening to jazz and listening to the, you know, different, like, slow jazz versus Charlie Parker's style of jazz, and we learned how to tap our feet and do some different things, you know, because I noticed, like, they used that tool and they were remembering that tool. So I guess that's one thing that
That's great. It carried over from
Yeah.
the time with Elise. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So the kids are getting it.
Yeah.
That's important too.
Right.
Really
right.
important.
And it's a mode that they seem to like to learn in. I have one student who, especially in the afternoons, checks out. You know, he's not engaged. He doesn't want to be engaged. And when this was going on with jazz, he was the one, like, asking other students to be quiet so that he could participate. And I was like, huh, look at that. Look who likes jazz. So then it became kind of an incentive with him. He got to, when he left to meet with the behavior interventionist, if he had had a good day, he got to listen to jazz with her. And, you know, so it's become something, like, even identifying things that they like and things a little bit differently. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Anything?
I think it's really been fun, like, notable people, like, looking at that, first I was like, I don't know, I wasn't super excited about it, but the kids got really into talking about, like, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was in the paper today.
Right.
But they're talking about these people who, as an adult, I barely know about, and I just think it's super cool to see. And, you know, they're hearing it from me, they're hearing it from Adam, and they're, you know, hearing different pieces. They're not always, like, they're all about Obama, and then some of them are like, he died, and I'm like, no, he didn't. But
well, but they talk, you know, and they
right, but they're
show
talking
interest,
about
yes.
right. They're talking about, like, some of it is current events, things that are global.
Right.
They're, you know, pronouncing names that I can't pronounce. They're excited about the picture of the guy from Australia. They're, you know, it's just exciting to see, like, they're engaged in something that most 6 and 7 year olds don't, like, talk about or have exposure to.
And they're the ones that notice, oh, do you know did you see how many of these people have won the Nobel Prize?
Yeah.
You know, they're the ones that bring that up when you're talking about, oh, and they won the Nobel Prize, and they're, you know, writing it down, and they're like, wait, this one did, and this one did, when you're making their books, and it's, you know.
And now,
So you're learning from the kids.
oh,
what's happening.
totally. Right, yeah, right. And we're talking about recycling, and one of the books mentioned something about global warming, and they're like, oh, wait, Robert Falcon Scott, but I actually said something different, and they were like, that's not his name, and they're correcting me, and, you know, like.
I think nice how they show their preferences for one or another notable people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they find similarities
Right.
or things they would like. I mean,
Right.
they also find in them like aims or objectives or things that you would like to take from them. Yeah.
Right. Like the college thing. So many of them went to college. And, you know, we talk about college ready, but college ready is abstract. Like, yeah, but then, like, when we wrote, how are you going to be a notable person, was our last page in the book that we made.
Oh, that's cool.
And a lot of them wrote, I'm going to college and I'm going to. Some of them wrote, win the Nobel Prize by, you know, whatever. But just that, like, idea of they transferred this idea that we've been talking about college, but what does that mean? Oh, that means that you become an important person because you go to college, because you want to learn, you know, so it was kind of a connection for them, seeing, like, this abstract idea into more of a, oh, so it means that you know.
That, like, with Miriam, for example, the way that she comes in and, like you said, you build on each day is a building from the day that's previous, and it's not something that I've done even as a teacher as much, but having you come in, and because that's something that you do with your discipline, I've started to do that in my teaching, and so I've actually done that with writing. And so this last time that we did a personal narrative, we spent one whole day on just who was there. And then we moved on to what were they doing, and then using your senses and taking that building aspect. So instead of doing a writing piece, okay, writing's done in 45 minutes, get it done, let's go. It was the idea of building, like what you had been doing with the class all along. And so it actually, this partnership actually, I think, makes me a better educator within my practice, even though it's something, a skill that she has with theater. So it was really helpful.
My students we were describing this week, because we were using poems and everything, so they link it with projects a lot, with theater a lot, and especially one of the girls who's very into costume designer, and she was like, yeah, like I see, it's like drawing, like it's like the drawing I did with Miriam. So she was like very excited about describing how was the dress that she was creating for one of the characters in the play.
So the kids are making the transference too.
Like, yeah, this
That's
is like the apple, like the apple.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Good.
I think that for my kids, the artists have really affected them in two ways. One, just in giving them the experience that I think some of my kids might want to build upon for their futures, and like thinking about there's not just actors that are on the stage and that's not just it. You could be a light designer or a costume designer or the props master. And for some of my kids, they're really into it, and it seems like it's something that they might want to pursue more long term. So I think that it's really given my kids a lot of like a greater opportunity to get to know themselves and like what interests them, because I wouldn't have talked about theater this year. So if I didn't, then where would they have known that this is something that really interested them? And my kids are also, they've been very excited to work with like the different artists, because I feel like my kids are very creative, and it's kind of like a kooky creative, but like they, but they really, like when Stefan was here and Miriam is here especially, just like the ideas that they have may not be what you're used to, because I know sometimes they say things and I'm like, what? But like really just thinking about like their perspectives and how like weighing their perspectives, I'm like, ah, like, okay, and like the connections that they make has really helped me see my students in a different way by looking at how actually creative they can be and just trying to work that into the rest of the hours that they're here.
Do you, like, for example, when we were studying with Libby and we were designing like how would we change the community, or how will we draw the garden, for example, like I wouldn't have never thought about this paper that we could flip over.
Or the transparency.
Yeah, the transparency. Yeah. So, you know, like she was bringing other materials to the class, or those PowerPoints where we could see like the distance from, you know, like with the colors and, you know, those materials. I would never know how to find that kind of photographs, like playing how to be an urban designer. Right. You know, so that's something that I have in my laptop and I can use for next year for sure.
Right. And that song with Stefan. Yeah. And every year that I've taught second grade, every year I've had to do the solar system. And every year it's like, okay, PowerPoint, memorize, write it down. Use that little silly acronym that we learned when we were 8. And I'm telling you, this is the only thing that I've noticed that these kids, they know it. They know that song, it's in their head. You hear them singing it, they're taking the test, they're trying to figure out what the next planet is, and they're, oh, you know, and so it's wonderful. I have every intention of using that next year, even if, you know, Stefan's not around. I think it's really nice.
Can I say something? What I find really interesting, especially when you're talking about the urban planner, is that I came in as a theater artist totally in my own 11 weeks. And when I asked the kids in the very beginning of playwriting to identify a problem, a lot of them, you know, are coming from their urban planning session from, was that a full year ago or 9 months ago? Mm-hmm. So as an artist, I also have seen the progression, and you know, more than one of them has said to me about Stefan, "You're going to sing a song this time?" No, I'm tone deaf. But so it was interesting as an artist to not know really what's going on, but because I'm there in the artist session to have heard that history of the other artists, which I found really helpful.
Good, great.
Nice as we were doing in literacy, we were talking about characters. We were talking about, you know, describing the beginning, middle, and end, sequence of events, problem solution, all those different literary techniques that come together at this point in the year to sort of form a story. And so we took everything that we had been learning over the last couple months about these story elements and watched this play and came back and then reflected on that. Then they did a retell. And they told the story. They talked about the problem and the characters. And it was really an incredible way for them to do this cross continent sort of learning, or content sort of learning, you know, so between global and global. Between, you know, not only projects but literacy, so it worked out really well.
Awesome.